Welcome to part 22 of my basic series on how to use the Blender game engine. In this tutorial, we're going to be creating a door system in the Blender game engine. In other words, if you have a character moving around a level, they might encounter a door in a wall, and you might have to press a key on your keyboard, and once you do so, the door will swing open, and you can go through the door, and the door will automatically swing closed. And that's going to be in the first part of this video. In the second part of this video, we're going to create a little bit more of an advanced system where you have to actually find a key in your level before you can open the door. And what that means is that your character, or the game in general, has to keep track, has to use a variable or a property to know if you've collected the key or not. So we're going to be using a special kind of property or variable called a Boolean variable. And that is a variable that can keep track of a true or false or an on or off state. In other words, we can have a false state if we have not yet collected a key in a level, or we can have a true state if you have collected that key. So we'll be creating a key and the door swinging open. So there's lots of things to do, but let's go ahead and jump in. If you want to follow along with me in this video, you'll actually find a link to download this exact file that's on my screen right now in the description area below this video on YouTube. So go ahead and download that file for free, of course. Follow along with me and we'll get going. Of course, if you want to see more videos just like this one in Blender and in tech, go ahead and click on that subscribe button below. And if you learned something in this video, go ahead and click on that like button as well. And of course, if you have not seen the rest of these tutorials in this Blender game engine series, I'll put a link up in the top right corner of this screen to the rest of this whole Blender game engine basics tutorial series. Let's go ahead and jump in. On my basic character, and if you download this file, you'll see that on this very basic character, this green cube, we have some controls. So if I go ahead and put my mouse in this window and press P on my keyboard to play my game, I can press W on my keyboard to move forward through the door, and of course I can move my mouse left and right to steer my character to make him walk left and right. Great. Let's go ahead and press escape on my keyboard to break back into not in the game, and I'm going to create a door object. So my 3D cursor is just in some random spot, so I'm going to press Shift S. Actually, I'm going to turn on my screencast key so you can see what keys I'm pressing over here and what mouse buttons I'm pressing as well. So I'm going to press Shift S on my keyboard, and that'll bring up the snap menu. I'm going to put my 3D cursor with Shift S back to the center of my world, which is right there actually. I'm going to press Shift A on my keyboard to bring up the add menu. I'm going to add a cube to my scene. This is going to be the door in my world, so I'll put it where the door should be. It's too thick right now, so I'll tap S and then Y and then 0.5, and I'll press enter. And when you press S and then Y and then 0.5 and then enter, it makes the door half as thick on that green Y axis. Let's go ahead and tap S and then X to scale it only on that X axis, and I'll move it over a little bit and I'll just adjust it. So S and then X, and then I'll move it up and then S and then Z to scale it up and down, and I'll press 1 to go to my front view, and I'll move it over a little bit, and that's looking pretty good to me. I'll scale it a little bit more that way, move it down a little bit. I'm okay with that, maybe a little bit above the ground, but I'm okay with that. If I go into edit mode with the tab key, of course, I can grab the top face of the cube and I can drag it down to match the height of the wall. But that's pretty much done in terms of the modeling of the door. There is a problem though. This door will not rotate at the right spot. If I tap R, it rotates from whatever view I'm looking at it from. But if I tap R and then Z on my keyboard, I want the door to actually spin not in the middle like this, but at a hinge. So I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode, and I'm going to go into edge select mode. And by the way, if you're not familiar with how to model in Blender or how to access edit mode, I'll put a link right now on the screen to my introduction to box modeling and using edit mode in Blender. So that will be on the screen right now, up in that top little eye card on the screen. So in edge select mode, I'm going to select this edge. That's going to be where the hinge is going to be, and I'm going to press Shift S on my keyboard, and I'm going to put my 3D cursor, that little red crosshair thing, right where I have a selected object or a selected edge. So cursor to selected. That 3D cursor is now where that edge is. So now if I press Tab to go back into object mode, I can set the origin that's over here in the tool shelf in the top tab, set origin to 3D cursor. And now that orange dot, the origin, is at that edge. So now if I tap R and then Z, we can see now that we have a swinging door. We need to animate this door, but we're not actually going to animate it with keyframes. We're going to animate the door programmatically. And so to do that, our door is going to have 4 states. In fact, just so we can see the door a little bit easier, I'm going to make it have a material. I'll go to the Materials tab with it selected, and I'll press New, and I'll make the door just a little bit bluey, purpley, sure, so you can see what's going on there. In order to make the door have an open animation or opening animation and a closing animation, we're going to use what are called states. And if you're not familiar with states in the Blender game engine, I did make a video on it, so I'll put a link to that on the screen right now, up in that top right card, that little I button up there. You can click or tap on that to see that states video. States are basically states of behavior, or they can have different, or at different times an object can have different behaviors or programs associated with it, or commands that it knows how to do or behave, and that's done by having the object selected, and down here in the logic editor window, this tiny little plus that doesn't look like very much, if you click it, you get this grid, and it's actually 2 sections. There's the top half with these 3 areas, and then the bottom half, and these represent the visible state that you're looking at right now in this window, and the initial state you can set as well. So there's basically 10 times 3, there's 30 states that we can access. So in this first state, as the door is behaving at the start of the game, it's not doing anything. The door should be still. So in this first initial state, or the first state right there that we have selected, we're not going to have much behavior. But in the second state, so I'll click in this next box over, we want to have the door swinging open. So in other words, in this first state, if you're familiar with how to use states, it's going to be listening for your character to press the space bar. In fact, what we're going to do in this first state is we're going to have a sensor listening for a message. And we're going to program it in just a few moments, where if you press the space bar, your character will send a message out, and the door will listen for a message, and that message is going to have the subject open. Now you can make any message. In fact, maybe I won't use open, maybe I'll use banana. Sure, banana. You can use any word you want in the subject area in your message sensor over here on the door. So now the door is going to be listening for a message with the subject banana in its first state, and when it hears that banana message, it's going to switch to its second state. So I'm going to add an actuator. It's going to be a state actuator right there. We'll connect up the sensor to the actuator, and all this state actuator does is it can send the door to its next state, or to any state that you like. In this case, we're going to go to its second state, in which the door is just going to be swinging open forever, but then it's going to have a timer to stop it from swinging open, so we'll look at that in just a moment. Let's go over now to the second state, and again, in the second state, the door is going to be always swinging open, so I'm going to add a always sensor for always, and so it's always going to be doing a motion, and I'm going to connect those up, and the motion that this door is always going to be doing in the second state is it's always going to be rotating on the z-axis, and I happen to know that a good value for this is -2, and I'll press enter. Actually, I'm going to use -4, and what that will mean is that the door will be swinging open faster. Okay, so as it stands, we have 2 states, and to get to the second state, the only way to get to that second state is for it to hear the message banana. Right now, if I press P, there's no way for that door to hear banana, so let's go ahead and program the cube to send that message, that banana message, to the door when we press the space bar. So I'm going to take these logic bricks that I have already to move when you press the W key, and to recognize mouse movement, to point or to steer using the mouse look actuator. I'm just going to collapse all of these. Those came with this file if you downloaded it in the description area below. So I'm going to add a keyboard sensor, and it's going to be the space key. I'll just type space in there to name this logic brick. To specify the space key, I'm going to click in this little box and press the space key. So now this logic brick knows to listen for the space key when the user presses that down. I'm going to add an actuator, and when you press the space key, I want to send out a message. So we'll add a message actuator. I'll connect that up, and we're going to send out, yes, the banana message, so I'll press enter after I type banana. You can actually specify a target object. So if you had multiple doors in your level, you might want to specify which one it is being sent to. But in this case, we're just going to shout the word banana. Okay, so great. Let's go ahead and collapse those. We don't need those anymore to be visible. So as it stands, we have the cube. When you press space, it's going to shout out, and I'm going to name this brick banana message. Great. And this door in its first state is going to listen for a banana message, and it's going to switch to the open door state, that second state, when it hears it. Let's go ahead and try this all out. I'll press P on my keyboard, and because the door is in its first state, it's not doing any movement, but it is listening. If I press the space bar on my keyboard, you can see now that the door starts its or it switches over to its open state, and now it's always rotating. So obviously this is not what I want. I want the door to stop after a few moments, and so we're going to add a timer or a delay to the door for it to switch to its stopped open state. So we're going to actually have 4 states for the door. I'll press escape on my keyboard to go back just out of the game, and I'll select my door, and I'm going to go to its states. Well, there we go. I had selected the floor and not the door. We have 2 states, the listening close state. We have the opening animation state. If we want the door to stop after a certain amount of time, in the second state, so I'll go to the visible, or I'll be able to see, making it visible, the second state. I'm going to add a delay sensor. And I'm going to add also a state sensor, because after the door has opened a certain amount, we're going to switch to the third state, and that's going to be the still and open state. So I'm going to connect these up. Now this is a matter of guessing and checking. I want to see how much I want to wait before switching to that third state. So I'm going to specify we're switching to that third state, and I'm going to guess, and I think I remember this value, the delay amount is going to be, let's say 60, and I'll press enter. So now after 60 ticks, that's 1 second in the Blender game engine, there's 60 ticks per second. We're going to switch to that third state. Let's go ahead and see how this works. If I press P with my mouse in this window, I can press the space bar, the door will swing open, and it waited too long before switching to that third state. So it lasted too long. That 60-second delay, or that 60-tick delay, was too much. So I'm going to turn this delay down to, let's say, 40. I think that's what it was. So if I press P now to play my game, and I press the space bar, there we go. I like that. The door is open, and because we have not programmed or added any logic bricks in our third state, that door will stay open forever, but that's not what I want. So I'll press escape on my keyboard. We'll go, with that door selected, we'll go to this third state right there. We want the door to wait a certain amount of time, so I'm going to add a delay sensor. We're going to make it delay 3 seconds, and 3 times 60 ticks per second is 180. That's where your math comes in. 3 times 60 is 180, and after 180 delay, we're going to switch to the fourth state, and I hope you can guess what that fourth state is. It's going to be the closing animation state. So we're going to add an actuator. It's going to be a state actuator. We'll switch to the fourth state, and I'll link those up just like that. And by the way, you can tell where you have, or what states you have connected systems of logic bricks in. Seeing these little dots, before we had that one connected, I'll just hold control and drag through that and drag through that. You can see, actually, that was probably a bug. Yeah, we didn't have any controllers in that one until we connected that up. That's why there wasn't a little dot in this state that we're looking at right now. So after 180 of waiting while the door is open, it's going to switch to the fourth state. In the fourth state, I'm going to have that same system where there is an always sensor, and the door is always going to be rotating in the opposite direction. So I'm going to add a motion actuator. We're going to connect up the always to the motion. In state number 1, we had a, and where is it? Oh, in state number 2, pardon me, we had a motion of -4 rotating always. So we're going to do the opposite here. In state number 4, we're going to have a rotation. That's the location. We need a rotation of 4. And after a certain amount of time, so that's going to be the same 40 ticks. So I'll add a delay and 40, we're going to switch back to state number 1 because the door will then be closed and we can wait to hear the banana open message again. So after a delay of 40, we're going to switch back to state number 1. And we'll connect those up. So hopefully that makes sense. We have 4 states now. We have a closed door state where it's listening for a message to open. We have a second state where it's always opening, and after 40 ticks, after a delay of 40 ticks, it's going to switch now to the open and stopped, the third state. So in the third state, I'll switch to that here. It is just waiting while stopped and open, and then after 180 ticks or 3 seconds, it's going to go to the fourth state. And in the fourth state, we have an always motion of the door swinging back closed, and after the right amount of time, it's going to switch back to the first state to listen for the open message again. That was a bunch of work. Let's go ahead and press P to try that out. When I load the game, the door is still. It should be in state 1. If I press the space bar, it opens, I can go through the door, and after I go through, or after 3 seconds, the door closes. If you're worried about the door actually colliding with your character, let's go ahead and see what that looks like. If I press the space bar, it'll just swing open, and it will push your character out of the way. And in this case, it kind of pushed me back through the door as I went through it. I wouldn't be too worried about the door kind of smushing you into a wall. That's okay. So there we go. There's our very, very basic open and close door system. But let's go ahead and make it better. I want to create a zone around the door in which you have to be in that zone or in a box that's going to be invisible in order to press the space bar in order to open the door. So in other words, if you're way far away from the door, if you press space bar, it won't open that door or all doors in your level. So I'm going to press Shift A on my keyboard to bring up the add menu. I'm going to add a cube to my scene. We're going to move the cube over. I'll tap S to make it bigger, and I'll make it maybe about that wide. Of course, at this point, I can tap S and then any of the X, Y, or Z keys on my keyboard to scale it. In that one direction only. So I want this door to be a little bit, or this box, this bounding box around the door, to be a little bit wider on that red X axis. So I'll tap S and then X on my keyboard, and then I'll tap S and then Y on my keyboard to make it a little bit deeper. And I like the size of that box, but of course I don't want to actually see that box when I play the game, nor do I want that box to act like a wall in itself. I don't want to actually make your character stop when it hits that. So I'm going to do a few things here. I'm going to have that box selected. I'm going to go up to the Object tab in the Properties window. I'm going to make this box display just so we can kind of see what's going on inside the box. I'm going to set the maximum draw type to wire, and that means that just as we're editing the game, we only see the box as its wireframe version. And I also, in the game, don't want the box to show up. And I don't want it to act like a deflector, like an obstacle in the game. So under the Physics tab, with the box selected, of course, we have the game engine up here set and not using cycles or the Blender engine. We're using the Blender game engine. That's why we have these options here. I'm going to make this object be invisible, and I'm going to make it a ghost. So what those things mean is that, of course, invisible means invisible, but a ghost means that it won't actually cause collisions, but you can still have logical collisions. It's not it doesn't stop it from having like programmatically detecting logic bricks. You can still detect when you're hitting that box, but it won't cause your box to stop moving, in other words. So let's press P. I can still move around. I can still press spacebar. It'll still open the door, but we want to make sure that you have to be in or colliding with this box. So I'm going to give this box an identifier, which can be any property you like. So with that box selected, I'm going to go down to my Logic Editor window, to the side panel. I believe if you're on a Mac or PC, it's on different sides of this window, but I'm going to go ahead and press Add Game Property. Doesn't matter what kind of property it is yet, but I'm going to name this box Area. Okay, this is the area in which you have to be inside in order to open the door. So now my character needs to not only press the space bar to open the door, he has to also be colliding with the box that has a property of area. So on our main character, I'm going to add another sensor. It's going to be a collision sensor, and the collision sensor has the ability to only detect if it's colliding with an object with a property with a name. In this case, the property has a name called area, so I'll type that in. Now this is where this AND controller comes in. This word AND means that we can actually connect it up to 2 sensors, and this word AND means that both of these now, the spacebar key has to be pressed and our character has to be colliding with an object with the property area. So both of these things now have to be true in order to send the banana message. So now, if I press P to play my game and I back up a little bit, I spin around and back up and I press the space bar, I'm pressing the space bar, it's not opening the door. But if I steer and drive up to the door and I press the space bar, the door will now open. Likewise, if I go too far off the other side and I press the space bar, it's not opening the door, but I can press the space bar once I'm close to it, and now I can go back through the door. Great. So we have a working open door system, but now I want to add that last step. I want to add a key, so you have to actually go and collect the key in order to open the door. And of course, I'll press escape to go back to editing my game. You can use any object you like to act as a key. It doesn't have to look like a key, but I'm going to actually press Shift A. If you don't want to spend time modeling a key, you can just add a monkey head or a cube or anything you like. I'm going to add a circle. I'm actually going to spend a minute and model a key out. So a circle, just add it over here. I'll drag it over here. A circle is a mesh, but it only has edges. There are no faces yet. And so what I'll do is I'll press Tab to go into edit mode. And again, if you are new to modeling in Blender, up in that top right corner in that little eye, I've already put a link to my intro to edit mode in Blender. So most of the things I'll do in this next minute or so while I'm modeling this key are up in that tutorial. So I'll press Tab to go into edit mode. I'll press F right away. F will fill in all the selected edges. I'm in edge select mode. I'll now go into face select mode. I'll select that one big circular face. I'll tap E on my keyboard to extrude up, because I'm going to have a circular area and then it's going to be like a skeleton key. I'm going to select these 4 faces. If I go to my top view with the 7 key, actually, those are not the right 4, are they? No, are they? I can't really tell very easily. No, I want that one and not that one, I think. I want it to be the side. There we go. And I'll tap E on my keyboard to extrude out those 4 faces. I'll tap S and then X on my keyboard to scale those 4 faces on the X axis, and then I'll type 0 on my keyboard and press Enter to make it totally flat there. And I'm going to push this back a little bit. I'm going to make it more like a fancy skeleton key. So I'll tap E on my keyboard and then E one more time. So now I have an area here and here, and I can extrude up and down. But actually, I'll press Z to go back into solid view. I'm going to do a loop cut. So I'll tap Control R on my keyboard, and then I'll click and then right click to put that right in the middle. I'll press Control B to bevel, and I'll pull a mouse out and click, because I want to make a few little fancy things like a skeleton key again. So I'll select all 3 of those faces. I'll tap E. I'll select 2 of those faces and tap E to extrude. I'll do the same thing but a bit shorter on the top. E, and then I'll select only those 2 and E. So now I have a very basic skeleton key. In fact, what I'll do is I'll select that face, and I'll tap I. I is inset faces. I'll make a smaller circle on the top and on the bottom. I'll go to my top view. I'll move that up over there. I'll delete those 2 faces. I'll tap X on my keyboard and select faces to do that. And I'm going to go into edge select mode. I'm going to select by holding Alt and right clicking that edge, and I'll hold Shift and Alt and that edge. So now I have 2 edge loops selected by holding Alt and then Shift and Alt and right clicking. And now I'm going to bridge those 2 edge loops, and you can do that with a W key on your keyboard. The W key brings up your specials menu in edit mode, and I'm going to select where is it? Bridge edge loops. And what that will do is it'll connect those edge loops. So now we have a wall inside of that hole, and it doesn't just go open inside to the inside of the mesh. So great, I have a little key object. I'll press Tab to go back into object mode. I'll give this object a material. I'll go to the materials tab, press new. I'll make it a nice orangey kind of yellowy color. Great, let's go ahead and make sure it's a good size. It's a bit big right now, so I'll tap S. I'll put it in my level, and from the side view, I'll rotate it -90 degrees, and I'll press enter. So R and then -90 and then enter, and I'll put it on the ground so my character can get to it. Great. Obviously you'd probably want to have a key more hidden in a level, but this is just for demonstration's sake. So now we're ready to have the character detect if they're colliding with the key, and we can make an object be collectible by detecting if we're collecting it. Now, in order to know if we've collected the key, we have to create a property down here on our character. And this property, this is what I was getting to in the beginning of this tutorial, this property is going to have a special type. For the most part, we haven't paid attention to in this whole tutorial series about what kind of property we're using. Normally, for colliding, it's good enough to just use any type of variable and just give it a name. But in this case, we have to use what's called a Boolean variable or a Boolean property. And the word Boolean, if you're in the programming world, if you're a computer scientist or you know a little bit about programming, you'll know that a Boolean variable is a variable that can keep track of a true or false state. You can remember if something is true or false. In this case, we're going to use a Boolean variable that is called hasKey. And of course, you can name variables pretty much anything. I believe you have to start the variable name with a letter and not a number. But other than that, you can name it whatever you like. So this Boolean property is going to start off with a false value. It's not going to have the key. So if we have this checkbox checked, it'll be true when we start the game, but we don't want it to be true. We don't have the key, so we'll leave it as false. When our character touches the key, we're going to set this property to true, and we're also going to delete the key. We're going to have the key remove itself from the game because there's only one copy of the key. So let's go ahead and program this. I'm going to make sure my key has a property that I can identify. So I'm going to add a game property. I'm going to call it key. I don't care what kind of property this is. So now on my character, I'm going to add a collision sensor. It's going to detect for any object with the property key. And if it touches something with the property key, we're going to change this object's own hasKey property. So I'm going to add a property actuator. The property we want to change is hasKey, and we want to assign it a variable or a value, true. So if we collide, I'm going to connect these up. If our character collides with the object that has the key property on it, the property of itself is going to be changed to true. The hasKey property is going to be changed to true, but we also need to make sure that the key disappears. So I'm going to select my key, and when my key collides, so I'm going to add a sensor for collision. When my key collides with my object, and my object actually needs a property, we could use hasKey, but I'm going to give my character a name. I'm going to name or give him a property with the name Steve. Sure, Steve is a nice name. So when my key collides with, I added a collision sensor, when it collides with a property or object with a property Steve, it's going to end itself. And to do that, you can add a edit object actuator. And in the edit object actuator, there are options, and one of them is end object, and that refers only to itself. So I'm going to connect these up. When the key senses that it's touching Steve, it'll end itself. I'm actually going to make this key up in the physics tab with it selected. I'm going to make it a ghost because we don't actually want the key to act like an obstacle, a physical barrier to our character. We want our character just to kind of be able to sail through the key as it's being detected and as it's deleting and as it's adding or changing the hasKey property to true. So I'm going to go ahead and try this out. I'm going to press P on my keyboard. Whoops, we have switched over to solid viewport shading. I'm going to change the viewport shading to material. So now if I press P, we can see everything. If I press the space bar on my keyboard and I'm in the zone, we haven't actually made it so that the door requires the key yet, but let's go ahead and see if the key disappears. It does. Great. We actually can't tell without using this print debug information whether or not we actually have the key. That's sort of happening in the background. You can't tell normally what a variable is set to, in this case true or false, but let's go ahead and program it so that you can only open the door if you have the key. And that code again is on our character, so I'm going to make this window a bit taller because we have more logic bricks now. There is a section in our logic bricks that says if you press the space key and if you are colliding with the area, so in area, If those two logic bricks are true, if you're pressing space and you're in the area, that's why they're both connected to the same AND controller, then it will send a banana message. But we need one more condition. We need a three-part condition that says that if we're pressing space and we're in the area, and our has key property has to be true. So I'm going to add one more sensor. I'm going to make it a property sensor. We're going to check to see if the property has key is equal to true. And by the way, you don't have to use equal here all the time. There are more options here, but in this case, we do need to use equal. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to connect that into this three-way check to see if we're pressing space, if we're in the area, and we're pressing, and we have the key. I can actually collapse this logic brick and then move it up. And I'm going to name that logic brick has key. Great, hopefully that makes sense. We have three plugged into the same AND. So now if I press P to play my game with my mouse in this window, and I go outside of the area and I press the space bar, of course the door will not open. If I go into that area and I don't have the key, the door will not open. And if I collect the key should disappear. In the background, that has key Boolean property is now hopefully set to true. If I go up the door and I press the space bar, it should now open. I should be able to go through and the door will close. And of course, because I still have that key, that Boolean has key property is still set to true, I should still be able to go up to the door and open it up, and now I can't see what I'm doing, and the door will open though. So that's how you create a key system, so you can open a locked door in a game only after you found the key. What I'll do is on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/borncg, I will put screenshots on the same day that I'm posting this video of all my logic bricks for this video, so go ahead and check out my Facebook page at facebook.com/borncg. But that will be it for this tutorial. Please go ahead again and click on that like button if you learned something in the tutorial, and go ahead and subscribe to this channel to see more videos just like this one in Blender and in tech. That will be it for this one. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.